My name is Sandra Klein, and I'm a fine art photographer. I have been visiting Japan every winter for 8 years now. 3 years ago, and it's almost 3 years to the day, my son died tragically. And the next time I went to Japan after his death, and I actually anticipated this, I found that I was able to not just grieve there in a way that I hadn't been able to in the past, but I could also portray that grieving. I think it had something to do with the spirituality of Japan, but also these surreal white landscapes that were very calm and peaceful, and yet, as I said, surreal. And I feel as if at home in my daily life, my noisy brain, it's much harder for me to feel that grief the way I can in that other world, a world that's so different from my daily life. I was originally a printmaker, but I've been making art through photography for some time now. And again, I loved this idea of creating these large landscapes. But I started taking photographs of historical objects in Japan, especially urns, but also the no masks, and creating the collages that you'll see in the show was really inspirational for me, especially using the urns, because of not just the urn symbolizes grief for me, but there's also a welcoming in the urn. So it's a universal object, and the idea of sewing on images and making these collages is a way that I feel I personalize my images. I've used some gold leaf in some of the images, and just combining these different, more personal ways of making the images really worked for me. I want people to look at this show. I'm hoping that they see the grief I feel, but I'm hoping they also see the joy I find in life also. And I feel like the duality of the urn, of the symbolism of the urn, is something that speaks to me because of that. Making art for me, the actual making of the art, is a respite for me. It's almost as much of a respite as being in Japan. There's a relief, there's a removal from the real world. I'm in a world where I'm just working with paper and objects, and there's a calm that I feel when I'm actually making the art that really is a relief for me. Many of us recently have experienced tragedy, deaths from COVID, and I think many people, including myself, feel a great grief for George Floyd's family, for the Black people who have suffered forever in this country. There's that external grief, especially with the protests, and yet we each have to find a personal way of grieving that is a salve, or we can't survive, or we die. And I've been able to find that for myself to a certain degree, and I hope other people can also.